I still remember the weight of the room that evening. It was my younger sister's graduation dinner, held in a banquet hall dressed with string lights and white linen tablecloths. The air was warm with chatter, glasses clinking, waiters passing by with trays of roast chicken and buttered rolls. On the surface, it looked like celebration. Underneath, I felt the silence pressing against my ribs like a stone. I had taken a seat near the end of the long table. My father stood at the head, smiling with the kind of charm he used when negotiating property deals. In his hand was a red folder, thick, heavy, with a black ribbon looped around it. He tapped it against his palm, waiting for the waiters to quiet. Then he cleared his throat and said, in that steady voice of his, "Tonight we celebrate Sloane's achievements. And tonight we also secure the future of our family business." I frowned. Family business, my firm, Pulse Bridge Legal, was mine alone. I had built it from sleepless nights and loans that nearly broke me. Still, I said nothing. He laid the folder flat in front of me, the notary stamp glinting under the light. "Sign this," he said calmly. "Half of your $2 million firm belongs to your sister now. She will serve as brand director. Together, you will make the Collins name proud." The room hummed with surprise. Then came the false applause. Half-hearted claps from relatives too polite to question. My mother leaned closer, pearls rattling against her glass. Her voice honeyed but sharp. "Family always comes first. Avery, we gave you everything. It is time you give back." I sat very still, my hands folded. Meyaf tight. The smell of roasted garlic filled the air, almost sickening. Across the table, Sloane was beaming. Like a child who had just been handed the crown in a play, she lifted her champagne glass and said loudly, "You should be grateful. Avery, at least they're letting you stay in the family photo." Laughter bubbled up around her. My uncle clapped her on the back, cousins leaned in to congratulate. To them, it was already settled. I was invisible in my own chair, but I could feel the leather strap of my briefcase pressing against my leg. Inside it rested papers of my own documents I had prepared for weeks, waiting for this inevitable ambush. I pressed my fingertips against the tablecloth and forced myself to breathe evenly. Outside, on the river, horns of passing ferries sounded like distant warnings. The world carried on, unaware of the battle being staged over dessert. I looked around at the faces my parents, all smiles and expectation, my sister glowing with victory she hadn't earned. In that moment, I felt the quiet sort of loneliness one only feels when surrounded by people who claim to love you, yet treat you as a means to their end. Still, I managed a smile. "This is what you've decided to do at Sloane's graduation," my father nodded without hesitation. My mother patted my arm with false comfort. "It is best for the family, dear." I could taste iron on my tongue from holding back what I truly wanted to say. Instead, I reached for my water glass, taking a long sip. Buying time. The crystal clinked softly as I set it down. "Interesting," I said. "Very interesting." No one noticed the way my hand brushed the brass clasp of my briefcase. No one noticed the calm before the storm. And no one realized that before this evening was done, it would not be me standing exposed, it would be them. I leaned back, letting the false laughter swell again. The charade continue. It was almost pleasant, knowing what I carried, what I would soon reveal. I caught Sloane's eyes across the table. She smirked, certain of her triumph. I returned the look with one of my own, measured, steady, unreadable. They thought they had written the ending. They had no idea the story had only just begun. What would you do if your family demanded half your business at your sister's graduation dinner? Tell me in the comments. Because in my briefcase, I carried something that would change everything. I grew up learning that silence could keep a roof from caving in. You swallow words. You smile for photographs. And you pay bills that are not yours because that is what good daughters do. It started with small things, field trip fees that somehow fell to me. Shoes for my sister when the season turned. Then the numbers got bigger and the requests grew teeth. By the time I left for graduate school, my parents were calling the money I borrowed for tuition our money. That little word did more damage than any storm. I put myself through school with night shifts and scholarships. I kept a spreadsheet that would have made an accountant proud. I can still see the first painful total $187,000 in student loans, written out in block letters on a yellow legal pad. I did not ask my parents to co-sign. I had learned early that co-signing came with a leash. I worked, and I paid, and I kept the interest from eating me alive by living the kind of life that looks frugal from the outside and, on the inside, feels like a long hallway with most of the doors locked. Sloane never walked that hallway. She is sunshine on polished floors, all charm and last-minute miracles. When she needed a car, my parents found one. When rent came due in a city she could not afford, they called me. That is the part you never see on those cheerful family posts: who makes the wire transfer at midnight, who goes without, who keeps quiet. I sent money more times than I care to count. I told myself it would buy peace. It never did. I built my company the way some people plant an orchard, patiently, season by season, with calloused hands and a stubborn belief that fruit will come. Pulsebridge Health began in a studio apartment with secondhand furniture and a laptop that ran too hot. It is a platform for remote rehabilitation, designed so a grandmother in a farm town can do her exercises without 3 buses and a winter coat. I made my first pitch in a conference room that smelled faintly of old coffee. I was told the market was crowded and the problem too ordinary. Ordinary, I said, is where people live. The structure came later, after a mentor pulled me aside and said, kindly, that heart is not a substitute for governance. We formed a Delaware C corporation. The intellectual property sits beneath it in a separate limited liability company, protected with the kind of precision that lets you sleep at night. Early backers came in on simple agreements for future equity, each with careful control provisions. We created a small board, my vote, 2 independent seats, and adopted rules that look dull until the day you need them. I placed my founder shares in a voting trust with an outside trustee. If that sounds like overkill, you have not met my family. When I say my family does not love boundaries, I am not being poetic. My mother believes in a single account labeled together. My father likes to announce decisions, then call the resulting thunder family consensus. He is the sort of man who can step into a room and start rearranging people like furniture. I learned to step sideways. I learned to own the deed. That spring, the one with Sloane's graduation and the fairy lights and the red folder things were already moving beneath the surface. 3 weeks earlier, I had signed a management services agreement with Helix Medical Partners, a group that handles compliance, billing, and operations for clinics and digital health platforms. Clause 4.3 of that agreement states in plain language that no family member of a founder may be employed in management without unanimous board approval. The ink was dry, the retainer was sitting in escrow, and Helix had already migrated our billing. I kept that quiet. Not because I was ashamed, but because people can wreck what they do not understand. The push from my parents came faster than I expected. A week before the dinner, my mother posted a photograph from the earliest days of Pulsebridge, me in a borrowed blazer, cheeks hollow, standing beside a banner I printed at a discount shop. Her caption read, "Proud family business." I let it slide. Then I heard through a loyal physician that my father had called to discuss partnership opportunities on our behalf. The sort of casual interference that gets doors closed for good. That same afternoon, a message from Sloane landed in the family chat. "Can we talk brand? I have ideas." Brand, in her mouth, means front door and then living room and then master bedroom. I muted the thread. There are moments when life sets a coin on the edge of a table, one breath and it falls to one side or the other. Mine came the day my accountant tallied the favors I had provided the free sessions for my father's shoulder, my mother's heel pain, my sister's pre-vacation massages when she swore the camera added 10 pounds, $42,000, give or take, over 3 years. Seeing it in one line knocked the wind out of me. Love is not a ledger. People like to say, and that is true, But when folks who claim to love you bring a ledger into the dining room, you had better bring your own. Two things hardened in me then. First, I would not hire family. Not now. Not ever. Not when the stakes are careers and patient data and trust one conversation at a time. Second, I would begin to separate the personal from the professional with paper and locks and polite phrases that sound like small talk but mean firm ground. We drafted a board resolution memorializing our policy. We documented attempts at interference. We prepared a cease and desist letter for false claims of affiliation, to be delivered only if necessary. I did not want a war. I wanted a boundary that did not need to be defended every weekend. When I tell you this, I am not asking for applause. I am telling you how a woman learns to sit with herself and listen to the old voice that says, "Quietly, you are allowed to keep what you built." That voice is soft. It has to be repeated. When you have been the reliable one, the dependable one, the check that clears, you forget that no is a sentence that does not require a footnote. On the afternoon of the graduation dinner, I slipped the Helix agreement into my briefcase along with the board minutes, the trust documents, and a neat stack of patient complaints from the week Sloan worked our reception desk last summer. There were scheduling disasters, billing mistakes, and a cheery email where she offered discounts to her friends because exposure is good for you. Right, I had given her a chance then. In good faith is a fragile thing. By the time the waiter poured the first round of champagne, I had decided two things. I would not argue that night. I would not explain what a management services agreement is between the salad and the dessert. I would, however, answer a demand with a fact. And I would do it with a steady voice. If there is one lesson I can offer to anyone listening on a late radio hour, it is this: never fight where the other side chooses the stage. Set your own table. Bring your own light. So when my father slid the red folder toward me and called my work our firm, I was ready. I did not rise to the bait. I did not reach for the pen he provided. I sipped my water. I let the room return to its cheerful hum. I felt, under the table, the brass clasp of my briefcase like a heartbeat. People like to think confrontation is loud. Sometimes it is quiet as paper. They believed what they always believed, that I would fold to keep the family smiling in photographs. They did not know about the trustee with no last name they could pronounce, or the independent board members with long memories, or the clause tucked into a contract that would make their announcement look like someone bragging about land the bank already owns. They did not know that I was done being the ledger they never saw. Next came the part they could not control when I opened the briefcase and let the room read along. I grew up learning how silence could weigh more than words. My father was a lawyer, sharp and decisive in the courtroom, but at home his silence cut deeper than any ruling. My mother filled that silence with performance pearls always polished, her laughter a little too bright. And my sister, Sloan, basked in the center of it all. Golden child in every family story while I was just background scenery. When I left for college, I thought distance would loosen their grip. I rented a one-room apartment near campus, worked late nights at the library, and lived on black coffee and day-old bagels. I should have been free. Yet every holiday, every dinner back home, I was reminded of what they expected: sacrifice without gratitude. One winter, I paid off part of Sloane's credit card debt. She had spent thousands on designer shoes, and my parents called it a young person's mistake. My own bills piled high, but I wired the money anyway, desperate for acknowledgement. My father barely glanced up from his glass of scotch when I told him, "That's what family does," he said, as though my worth was measured only in what I gave away. Years blurred: law school, bar exam, nights spent sleeping on case files, and still the same pattern. They dined at steakhouses while I clipped coupons. They vacationed in Florida while I negotiated payment extensions with my landlord. When I asked for a co-signature on a small loan to open my practice, my father folded his arms and said, "Risk builds character." 2 weeks later, I learned he had written a personal check for Sloane's wedding deposit, $42,000, without hesitation. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was building something lasting, And I did. Pulsebridge Legal grew from 2 folding chairs and a borrowed desk into a downtown office with glass walls and polished floors. I built it, case by case, client by client. But success didn't shield me from their expectations. It only made me more valuable to them. The turning point came on a spring afternoon when I visited their home. My mother insisted on tea in the parlor. Her china cups arranged just so. On the mantel, above the fireplace, sat an envelope sealed with red wax. My father gestured toward it with the same casual tone he used when presenting evidence in court. "Future plans," he said. "Sloan will inherit equal partnership in your firm. It's already drafted. Just a matter of timing." I remember staring at that envelope, my pulse pounding. The word inherit clanged in my head like a bell. My firm wasn't theirs to divide. It wasn't a family heirloom to hand over like silverware. It was mine. Built from years they never saw, sacrifices they never respected. Sloan smirked over her tea. "You should be grateful," she said. "At least we're including you." The way she said it made the room tilt, as though I was the guest, not the child who had clawed her way into recognition. I held my cup steady, though my hand shook. "Is that so?" I asked. My mother leaned forward, pearls brushing against her sweater. "Avery, dear, it's about unity. A family business stands stronger together." Unity. The word tasted bitter. Where was unity when I skipped meals to pay tuition? Where was unity when I slept on a library couch because rent was late? Their unity had always circled Sloan. Never me. That night I walked the streets for hours, past shuttered shops and glowing billboards, wrestling with the rage that had settled in my bones. I thought of every dismissal, every time my achievements were brushed aside so Sloan could shine. I thought of the red wax seal waiting on the mantel, holding the promise of erasure. But what they didn't know was that I had already prepared my own documents, quietly, methodically. I had shifted control of the firm into a protective structure, an LLC with clauses they couldn't override. My father's voice, my mother's pressure, Sloan's smug entitlement, none of it would matter against black ink on paper. I realized then that revenge wasn't about shouting across the table. It wasn't about winning an argument. It was about permanence. About making sure the next time they tried to corner me, the ground would fall out beneath them instead. When I returned to my apartment that night, I laid out my portfolio on the kitchen table. The leather cover gleamed under the dim light. Inside were contracts, board resolutions, and notarized agreements. My hands stopped trembling as I placed them in order. Each page was a weapon not of violence, but of clarity. I promised myself I wouldn't be invisible again. Not to them. Not to anyone. And as I slid the final page into place, I knew the next family dinner would no longer be theirs to control. It would be mine. Have you ever been expected to sacrifice everything for family while getting nothing back? Share your story in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone. Because when the next dinner came, I brought my portfolio and their laughter didn't last long. The graduation dinner was meant to be Sloan's night. At least on the surface. Fairy lights dangled from the rafters. The waiters carried trays of sparkling cider for the toast. And the photographer moved like a shadow, capturing every staged smile. But when my father tapped his spoon against the glass, I knew the script had been written for me. He rose, red folder in hand, and announced with the certainty of a judge delivering sentence. Tonight we celebrate not only Sloan's accomplishments but also the strength of the Collins family. Starting tomorrow, she will serve as Chief Brand Officer of Pulsebridge. She will hold a 25% stake. It is already arranged. Applause rippled across the tables. My mother's pearls gleamed under the light as she added, "Avery, this is the unity your company needs. Sign the agreement tonight." Then came the words that cut through the clapping like glass breaking. "This is not your house," my sister said, grinning as if she had won the lottery. "You're just living here on pity." Laughter rolled through the hall. My face flushed, but I stayed still, one hand resting on the brass clasp of my briefcase beneath the table. They thought the ambush complete. They thought I would fold, as I had so many times before. Instead, I stood, slowly, deliberately. I placed the briefcase on the white tablecloth. The chatter hushed, even the clink of glasses stopped. I clicked open the locks. The sound was louder than the band had been all evening. Inside lay a leather portfolio, its surface worn from years of carrying it to meetings where no one expected me to last. I pulled out the first document and laid it flat, the management services agreement with Helix Medical Partners. The Helix logo gleamed in blue across the header. My father frowned. "What is this?" "This," I said, my voice steady, "is the reason your announcement means nothing. 3 weeks ago, our board approved Helix to manage all administrative functions. Clause 4.3. No family member may hold management roles without unanimous board consent. The board is composed of myself and 2 independent directors. You were not on it." Gasps echoed from the guests seated nearby. My mother's hand froze against her pearls. Sloane's smile faltered. I did not pause. I slid another document forward, a ledger compiled by my accountant. This lists over $42,000 in free services this family has received over the past 3 years. Physical therapy sessions, legal consultations, travel reimbursements. While you vacationed, I ate ramen to keep the firm alive. A murmur spread through the crowd. Relatives shifted in their chairs. Whispering, I pressed on. From the folder, I produced patient complaint forms from the summer Sloane worked at my front desk. 15 scheduling errors, 23 unauthorized discounts, 8 of them to her sorority friends, 31 billing code mistakes that nearly triggered an audit. I stacked them on the table, one by one, the pile growing taller until it stood like a monument. Sloane's cheeks reddened. "You did this on purpose." "No." I cut her off. "You did this by thinking rules didn't apply to you." My father leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Avery, we can negotiate. 20% instead of 25. A trial period." I closed the portfolio with a snap that made him flinch. "My firm is not your piggy bank. It is not a family inheritance. It is my career." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my mother tried her final weapon, guilt. "I never thought you would put business before family," she whispered, eyes glistening. I held her gaze. "I am not putting business before family. I am putting boundaries before exploitation." The silence was heavier than any gavel strike. Around us, guests stared, forks poised above half-eaten cake. The photographer lowered his camera. For once, the Collins family show had no applause. I gathered my documents, sliding them back into the briefcase with the same precision I used to prepare a case for court. With each page, I felt years of weight lift from my shoulders. Before I sat down, I spoke one last sentence. Starting next month, any services provided to this family will be billed at standard rates. Our charity program is for those who cannot afford care, not for those who refuse to pay. A chair scraped loudly as Sloane bolted upright. "You've always been dramatic. Avery, acting like you did everything yourself. We made you." I looked her in the eye. "No, I made me." The band struck up again, but the music fell flat. The room would never hear our family name the same way again. If your family tried to hijack your career in public, would you fight back at the table or wait until later? Drop your answer below. Because that night was only the beginning. The real reckoning came when we sat down for mediation. Face to face, with lawyers at our side. The weeks after that dinner felt like walking through a storm that refused to pass. My phone lit up with calls I did not answer, messages I did not open. My mother cycled between guilt and fury voicemails that began with, "We just want to talk," and ended with, "You've embarrassed us in front of everyone we know." My father sent terse emails, copied with words like family unity and reputation at stake. Sloane filled social media with glossy posts about our family business, smiling in borrowed light. For a time, I let them speak into the void. I focused on work, on the steady rhythm of clients walking through my door, on the team that looked to me for direction. But silence has a way of feeding lies. When I learned that my parents were calling colleagues and hinting at partnership, I knew quiet would no longer serve me. It came to a head at a fundraiser gala downtown. I had been invited months earlier. A chance to meet potential investors and partners. I wore a navy dress that reminded me of resilience, strong, simple, no frills. I was speaking with a hospital administrator when the lights dimmed and the MC called for attention. On the projection screen behind him appeared a video I had never authorized. Sloan, seated at a marble counter, proclaiming that she was the new face of Pulsebridge, ready to lead branding into a bold new era. My stomach turned. The logo of my firm sat in the corner of the screen. Stolen without permission, her words spilled into the room with my parents' guidance. We are shaping the future of healthcare delivery. This is our family's legacy. I heard the murmurs ripple across the audience. People turned toward me, eyebrows raised. I excused myself from the conversation, heart pounding, and made my way to the stage. The MC stammered as I took the microphone, but I spoke with the calm of someone who had prepared for this moment. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. I said, what you have just seen was unauthorized. Pulsebridge is not a family venture. It is a corporation, governed by its board, with strict policies against nepotism. No member of my family holds any role in management or branding. Gasps. Then silence. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, the Helix Agreement again. This time enlarged on poster boards by my assistant, who had wisely prepared for trouble. The clause forbidding family employment glowed under the spotlights. From the back of the room, I saw my father stiffen, my mother clutch her pearls, Sloan whisper furiously into her phone. The performance was unraveling in real time. Then came the final twist. One of the guests, a friend of a friend, connected his phone to the big screen. A group chat appeared, Colin's family only, and there, plain as day, were messages from earlier that week. My mother pushed Sloan on stage. If Avery resists, remind her we own the brand. My father, she won't fight back in public. She never does. The crowd erupted. Some laughed in disbelief. Others shook their heads. The administrator I had been speaking with earlier leaned toward me and whispered, "You don't need them. We'll set up a meeting tomorrow." I returned to the microphone, my voice steady. Truth has a way of finding daylight. Pulsebridge will continue to grow, but it will do so with integrity. Tonight, you've witnessed what happens when entitlement collides with governance. Applause broke out, not polite, not forced, but genuine. My family slipped out the side door, their faces pale, their power crumbling under the weight of exposure. That night, as I walked home across the quiet streets, I thought of how long I had been the invisible one, the scapegoat, the one told to be grateful for scraps while others feasted. Yet here I was, not only surviving but thriving. Their cruelty turned into my clarity. I paused under a street lamp, the city humming around me. Revenge, I realized, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through contracts, through clauses, through receipts laid bare for the world to see. And once exposed, the curtain never rises the same way again. If your family tried to claim your life's work as their own, would you stay silent or go public? Comment your answer below. Because after the gala, they demanded mediation, and that meeting revealed secrets even I wasn't prepared for. 2 weeks passed before the summons arrived. Not a phone call, not a knock at my door, but a letter on cream-colored stationery, signed in my father's tight script, family mediation. Chelsea Cafe, Tuesday at 10. They had chosen neutral ground, perhaps believing a public setting would soften me. I smiled when I read it. They still thought optics were their strongest weapon. On Tuesday morning, I arrived early. I chose a corner table with a clear view of both entrances and laid my leather portfolio in front of me. The same briefcase they had once mocked for being too heavy. Too serious. To me, it was armor. Inside rested every document, every ledger, every record of years they tried to rewrite. When they entered, they did so as a unit. My father's shoulders squared beneath his blazer, my mother's pearls catching the light, Sloane trailing behind in designer sunglasses. They sat across from me. The waitress took orders we would barely touch. And then the performance began. "Avery, dear," my mother started, her voice low and syrupy. "We only want what's best for you. You've embarrassed us." "Yes, but families heal." My father leaned in, hands clasped. "Blood is thicker than water. If we can just work out terms, say, a consulting role for Sloane, this can all be put to rest." I listened, patient as a judge. Then I slid a folder across the table. Inside were printouts from their own social media posts, claiming ownership of Pulsebridge. Using words like family business and our firm, I placed another folder on top, the cease and desist drafted by my attorney. Sloane scoffed. "You wouldn't dare." I met her gaze. "Already filed." Her face drained of color. My father cleared his throat. "Tried again. We raised you. We invested in you. Surely you can't cut us off like this." I laid down one last document, a spreadsheet itemizing every loan, every free service, every transfer I had made over the years. $16,450 loaned to Sloane. Never repaid. $42,000 in medical treatments for them both. I tapped the page lightly. This is what I invested. And unlike you, I expect repayment. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. My mother's eyes filled with real tears this time. Not the rehearsed kind. "You can't mean this. We're family." "Family," I said softly, "celebrates achievements instead of stealing them. Family sets boundaries. Family doesn't demand signatures on red folders." It was then my father let slip what I had long suspected. "We never thought you'd succeed on your own. We were only trying to secure your future." The truth, spoken without disguise. The final fracture in the mask. I stood, gathering my portfolio. "I've already secured my future. What you see in front of you is mine. Built without your approval. Built despite your dismissal." I left them there with their untouched coffee. The pearls and blazer dulled under cafe light. The city air outside was cool, sharp, and honest. Months later, as autumn painted the skyline, I stood in my expanded office. The waiting room bustled with patients. The walls carried certificates and community awards. And my staff moved with purpose. Pulsebridge was no longer just my survival. It had become a sanctuary for others. Sloane found work at a corporate desk somewhere uptown. My mother busied herself with charity gardens. My father remained silent. For once, their lives spun without tugging on mine. One evening, after a long day of clients, I hosted dinner with friends and colleagues, the kind of chosen family who clink glasses without hidden agendas. Laughter filled the room, warm and unforced. I raised my glass and felt the weight of years slide away. "If there's one thing I've learned," I said, "it's that healing sometimes means saying no, and no is not cruelty. No is clarity." They toasted to that, and I let the sound wash over me. For the first time, I was not the invisible one. I was exactly where I belonged, visible, steady, and free. If you think Avery made the right choice, comment right. If you have a better way to handle family betrayal, share it below.